Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. It is my great pleasure to have my good friend Tony Mazzali, who's the CEO of CG Financial, with us today. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Good day to be
Uh,
here.
well, it's. I think I want to jump right in and talk a little bit about your origin story. You know how you got here. You built this wonderful firm out in the Midwest in a beautiful part of the country, and but tell us how you started and how it all came together.
You know, kind of a great example of I stumbled into this career thinking I wanted to go into law. Thankfully, the law school that I was accepted at had a wait list for a year, so and I wanted to practice business and tax law, and decided to answer an ad from Ameriprise at the time, American Express or IDS. It
Yeah,
goes that far back.
that's back.
Yep. And, decided I'd maybe get a year of finance under my belt and started in their training program, had great success there, had several years of training other people, running team practices, so forth. And as they say, the rest is history. And it kind of history just grabbed me and rolled me into this career and just really caught me right out of the gate.
Yeah, but you've also been able, starting out like many of us did through a good training program, which they're becoming rarer and rarer these days. Which is a shame. But then there really is no training for how do you build a business. Now you've built this sort of well diversified, multi-billion-dollar organization that caters to a great network of clients. But you've also built a lot of efficiencies in it. I always found it interesting the way you sort of just you were sort of ahead of the game with digital stuff. You were ahead of the game with a bunch of these. So tell us about that a little bit and how that came to be.
Yeah, and I would almost break that in two parts because I think your point is really valid that it used to be and we follow studies pretty close. Have done a lot of work with a lot of the industry consultants that I think are really good. And the old mark used to be at $1 billion. You were kind of reaching the enterprise
Yeah,
space.
yeah,
And I would say that that's a transition, and I would say we follow that where we transition from being a practice to an enterprise. The problem is my management style didn't follow. So I would say a lot of what you said about efficiency has been really focused at the practice level, which is the engagement of the client, the operations of the client, our client experience, very much focused in that respect. But early on, and most recently in the last 5 to 7 years, it really caught on to the like enterprise efficiency,
yeah.
which is the overarching running the business from a CEO or a higher level than just from practice. And it took me longer to probably adjust to that idea, and I got it now. And it partially because it's painful if I don't. I've felt the pain, and it's become very clear and evident that without it, you stall pretty quick.
But and also you've like diversified into tax, insurance. There's all these different pieces that now the advisors can take advantage of and sort of built that at an enterprise level too, which I think is great.
Yeah, and I think that's a reflection of you. I think you accurately pointed out. I mean, the training program I came from was exceptional,
Yeah.
um,
I
and
did Merrill's training program. They were great days to have it. Everybody went through one of these great training programs.
yeah, and I think it's just a kind of a flashpoint to talk about the current state of the industry. Is are we really? Is there any place or where is that happening? And I think that's probably one thing that's lost. And I get the economics of it and kind of the evolution of the industry, but I think for the future of the industry, that's something that we've got to kind of put as a bold and italic as to how does that look. But that being said, that training I had was focused on the comprehensive view of a holistic engagement with a client. That's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and as I kind of one of my mantras that I've been, talking to my team about is what's old is new. And if you read old training material, which I have all the training notes that I went through, and it's funny, I keep a file folder of it. You could literally look at flashpoints in our industry of what's important today. And
Yeah.
it recycles. It's just the industry recycles. So we haven't moved much from that. It's always been comprehensive, holistic, individual planning. With a fiduciary focus was the later evolution of the business to where that became really the tenet, the fiduciary focus.
And but you do have a way of bringing guys into the business. I mean, you've been bringing in younger people, newer people, and feeding now it's a pretty big organization.
Yeah, yeah. No, we've been, really good at our organization's been really good. I mean, at one point, I think we had probably 85% of our employees had either started here as an intern in college and or we were the first job in their career and they never left.
Yeah.
They were trained here.
Yeah.
And that's good. And it presents some challenges as well because you can create somewhat of an echo chamber. And we had a little bit of that going on early on. So but yes, we have a focus, and today I think one of the things that's unique that we're doing is we dedicated literally a whole segment of the business just to next gen advisors and completely disrupted the engagement model because we just feel the next generation of wealth and the people that are earning good income now that aren't wealthy but are going to inherit new income, their fact patterns different than what I
Yeah.
started with. It's completely different.
Yeah. I think that's there aren't a lot of firms at the 10, 12, whatever billion level that are doing that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're just not. And I think Merrill Lynch just got back into, speaking of whatever old is new again, just got back into training, but they let it go, for years. And our business is an apprentice business, right? Didn't you learn from seeing other guys do it?
Yeah.
I mean, and mistakes as well as positive things. So you really need to be around people. It's a people business all the way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, with our COVID experiment, that was one of the messages I tried to pass along to early career professionals and people in the company was virtual sounded good, but it negated the mentoring and apprenticeship fact. We maybe other organizations figured it out, but early on, I recognized that there's no way our organization could somehow virtually create the apprenticeship and mentoring that face to face in person did. And
Yeah. And
so that I think that just taught us that that's necessary.
that's interesting because that's a segue into something else I want to talk to you about, which is AI. Because again, I know you guys are digitally based. I know you've been working on it, and it seems to me like we're in a situation where I'm concerned about the regulatory aspects of it. Right, I'm the big picture. I worry it's going to turn into like our cell phones.
Yeah.
Were but, you know. We all should have known those were client contacts, right? Why didn't we, but
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're facing hundreds of millions in fines. And like you said, we kind of had this casual experiment, which I think is interesting with COVID, where we went virtual and we worked, but in terms of trying to build a long term organization, it misses the human element. You miss something if you don't have it. So I'm curious to know, and I think an RIA or someone who's on their own, this is more difficult than if you're in an organization that has some direction around AI. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what are your thoughts around it? How you guys developed a plan for AI going forward, and what are you worried about with it?
Yeah. So worried. I would say agree with what you said. I mean, I've been is the compliance effect
Yeah.
is truly we've got a team, in fact, currently kicking off a major initiative on really data harnessing and ensuring that right at the front of that whole train is our compliance department to enable them to move at the speed of the information. I mean, they can't be at the back end of the process. In my opinion, they need to be at the front end. So that,
And security, that kind of goes, cybersecurity and compliance are both.
yeah, all that, right? I mean, they have to have virtual access to all that information because I believe in order for that to happen, AI is their tool then. And I think that's kind of one of the themes in our organization is that the frustration of getting big, one of the frustrations of getting, everybody wants to get big. One of the challenges getting big is the find and grind. That's just more stuff at a faster pace that you have to find and grind. And for our organization, we view AI as an accelerator
Yep.
to the find and grind. And basically, that's how we're positioning it is it's going to enable our really talented people to just be far more talented because the find and grind that was on their plate before has been reduced significantly from our early experiment with AI. And it's in our systems team and our intelligence team's job is to be able to leverage, force multiply that tool to enable the friction to be very low for those people. And so, that we're kind of taking this approach of a one big jump up and then almost a stair step model where we're going to stay and really let it sink in for a while. And in this world, when I was with some CTOs at a roundtable, I said, "How long is a while?" And they're like 6 months. Their answer was 6 months. You remember when we made a decision on CRM or a big tech, and it was a 10-year decision.
Yeah, yeah,
Their evolution of when a while is now is 6 to 12 months. And that's the game that, back to my point, that as an enterprise leader now, those are kind of my barriers.
yeah, yeah. And you got to be if you're an individual RIA, you kind of want somebody else thinking about that so you can deal with your clients. You know what I mean? And put in all the pieces that you need to grow. You know,
Yeah.
I know for you, we've talked about this. Your other concern is around aggregation,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk a little bit about that because I know it's one of your passions.
Yeah, I think, and part of it's just reflective of my journey
Yeah.
that, and I think, Tony, because I still do work with individual clients, and it tends to be my specialty or niche where I work with people that have built successful, wealthy
Most
business.
of senior management at your firm still does, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
still probably
Yes.
got people doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
They still touch. Most of them have got niches. Mine tends to be with that kind of wealthy business owner. Well, uh, you know, I think for our industry are we losing the definition of the legacy in the aggregation process?
Yeah.
Because in almost every cocktail hour or lunch chat that I have at roundtables or with groups of advisors, the conversation evolves around multipliers. How many X's in the multiplier? And that's really what drives the entire conversation. And I'm not here to say that nobody needs to be a capitalist in this business because they built a successful business, but I've just found personally for myself that the legacy means more than just that. And I
Yeah.
think that conversation's being muted out. What are you leaving behind? What did you start? Because there's some really successful businesses that had an impact on communities, that had an impact on families, that had an impact on clients. And to me, all of that comes into that equation of what's the legacy. And I think it's really the process and the conversation around the rapid pace of the aggregation and what's getting muted out in terms of how that legacy and how the definition of that
Yeah,
legacy continues.
I think it's easy to just sort of look at the news and then just talk multiples. So that's all people are interested in. And you and I know when you talk to advisors, it's like people hate advisors, but they love their guy. My guy's great. You
Yeah,
got
yeah,
to talk to my
yeah,
guy. You know what I mean? And then advisors, oh, they're all interested in money. They're money all the time. But at the end of the day, the good ones have made enough money for a life. They're making more money than they ever thought they were going to make. And what gets them up every day? It's dealing with people and feeling like they're part of something, done something important.
yeah.
You and I know when you talk to people. I just saw this study coming up from it was the Cerulli or somebody, no, McKinsey had a study that advisors are going to have to become more emotionally involved, like they're going to have to become psychiatrists for the ultra high net worth because they're going to be able to get all their other stuff from AI, like all the investment. Do they even know this business? That's what we do. you
Yeah.
might as well have a couch in your office, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it's that the legacy lives on is the helping people. You know what I mean? You want to think of the great guys in this business, the men and women that have done so well. You want to emulate them, right? They left behind something more than just a multiple.
Yeah, and I think, and you bring up a good point there. I mean, we talk about this regularly with our clients, is the value of our investment platform. And there's been studies by Vanguard and a lot of industry people on, how do you create value with investments? And one of the value of an advisor, the largest percentage of value of an advisor is the behavioral finance coaching. It was behavioral, and that's the person to person. It's the psychologist that you talk about, and all, there's a lot of other tax management, tax efficiency. I mean, those are all percentages of that value, but by far the largest percentage was behavioral management. And that behavioral management, in my view, can't be replaced by AI. So our teams are directed to focus on how do you change that equation with the client, because that's the highest layer of value.
Yeah, no question about it. And also, um, that bodes that's into markets too. I mean, I think Ron Krasevsky said this in an article he wrote with us was that basically, our marketplace is not a chessboard, like with a finite number of moves, right? There's regulation. Who the frick knows what's? I mean, that could be anything, that especially these days. You have politics, regulation, emotions. People, you have a special needs kid. You have this, you have that. And very hard to it's AI is not going to be able to get that human piece of it, straightened out
No,
because it's not human.
no. But I do think it brings up a good point that one of your earlier questions about the evolution of the industry from a career standpoint. And again, we're coaching our younger advisors. The skill set that is, in my view, that is going to be one critical is that human to human explaining, collaboration, listening. And in the current digital world, as you pointed out with your phone, most of our communication is done on the phone, and it creates an atrophy of those skills. And we're shouting it from we can't do that anymore. In fact, we're redesigning a new office where we just have a social space that enables people to go talk. No phones allowed.
Yeah.
So literally it promotes the idea of and having events where we do kind of old fashioned happy hours where everyone just stands around and talks about their week.
Right.
Because it's funny because it's not happening. And then when we go to explain things to a client or to an advisor or whoever it is, I mean, it's not as smooth. It's not as relatable.
When we talked a little bit about that it's an apprentice business. Have you ever seen that video of they got like a couple of 13-year-olds or 15-year-olds and they try to work a rotary phone?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, freaking
yeah,
do it. They can't figure out the buttons and
yeah.
they're talking to each other, hanging it up, they're pulling it around. They can't get it. And
It-
sometimes you feel like that's the way they are with interactions too. I mean, my kids are older, but still, you time in the office is important. That's how you figure this stuff out. And if you're gonna get new business, you'll get something out of I think that this AI stuff and a lot of the digital stuff has been pretty good at trying because you can't cold call anymore, which was the best way. So now if you sort of have this big digital net, you can maybe get in some contacts that way, but you still have to eventually talk to them
yeah.
and be competent.
Yeah, and I sure, the AI to me is so exciting because it's one of the first tech innovations that I got right away. I mean,
Yeah.
it made sense to me right away, and it has been impactful right from me to others. So I think really think it's, quite frankly, it's a tool for the founder, the very experienced person to really simplify and communicate in a much larger capacity, without having to have multiple conversations, which is what wears us out is how do we translate that message where AI allows that to happen in a very smooth fashion. I mean, at least that's what I've found. And it's given me hope on maintaining and extending the career and the
Yeah.
viability and the relevancy in the career.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to go too far afield on this on the aggregation stuff without talking about partnership, right? Because I know that's also an important part of it. And we're not hating on PE either, or
No.
taking a strategic financial partner, or having a good balance sheet because you need all that stuff. And we're in this business for as a legacy to our families too, right? So a little bit about partnership. I know that's been important to you guys too, over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's examining the other layers. I mean, clearly that's a layer.
Yeah.
The aggregation to a final sale, whether it's fully expected up front or it just becomes the reality through the process. Either way, it doesn't really negate. There are other layers to the
But you
strategy.
guys, you'll take somebody through, and you'll do it yourself. Like, you'll say, "Hey, we'll
Oh
we'll,
yeah,
we'll buy this for you. We'll take you through a life cycle of whatever you need."
yeah. In fact, one of the more attractive options we're finding right now is what we call an incubator model, where essentially the founder is just stuck, and if there's too much, there's not the time frames don't match. They may have the next successor in house. They need more time and structure, and the founder doesn't have either the capacity, desire, or time to make that structure happen. Where we can step in as an intermediary for a period of time, go in and come out.
Yeah,
And that incubator gives it the time. So we can change the equation just through time by enabling that person and providing the structure to that person that the founder, quite frankly, just either is not capable or not willing, or it's just the point it's not in their desire set. They don't want to.
yeah,
And it extends that timetable to make the thing work. And I think we're really starting to find those operators that their legacy is defined by something more than the layer. That layer helps them define and gives them kind of an extra push
yeah.
to enable it to happen the way they want it to happen now. And I think that's going to be, it's just another layer to examine that I believe that beyond just the multiplier effects, that discussion, when you really look hard at this, there's ways to do it that it's still it's no different than when we sit down with clients when they come in and they say, here's my money. And I think a good advisor, which most of the ones that are in your community are, we stop and say, what's it all for? Let's define that and start peeling the onion back. If we're not peeling the onion back on our own firms and really what is the value of what we want it to do, and then how are the multiple ways we can get there, I think it's examining some of the other layers that are involved in it that are
Yeah,
options.
and being creative and custom and bespoke, right? For
That's
the
right.
so what do you think? The final question, because believe me, we're getting at the end here, over 20 minutes. Where's CG in the next 3 to 5? I would say five, but I think we talked about our. I think things are getting quicker. So where do you see CG and the industry next?
Yeah, our trajectory, we're really excited about the trajectory of where things are going. We went through a
Growing tremendously.
reorganization. Yeah, we went through a reorganization about 5 years ago and literally shut down all marketing and growth activities to enable us to catch up on the enterprise operational side. And probably like most founders, I thought that would take 6 months, and here I am 3.5 years later, and or 4 years later, and it's about 6 to 9 months ago, I think we turned the corner, and we're really starting to catch the ground now and really get traction. So it took longer than we anticipated, but I see now with our forecast, it's coming very quickly that I think our trajectory is moving in the right direction. The strategy when we talk to advisors about these concepts of the new advisor training, about maintaining the commitment to the clients, about finding what's really the other layers of your legacy that need to come out in your plan. And when they're looking for a partner, we're finding a lot of people taking second, third meetings, and that's telling me that we're on the right track.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, look, I'm going to leave it there. That's a high note. Great talking to you, and we can do this again, Tony. And I know you've written some good pieces with us too, so people can see that. And so appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it, brother.